Hi, I'm Harry Wingfield from the UCF IRB staff. This learning module covers the basic information you need to know about HIPAA. HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Research is affected by the section of the HIPAA Act that covers confidentiality for medical records. Does your study involve HIPAA? If your study is using protected health information, you must either obtain signed permission from the research subject to access and use this data, or obtain a waiver of HIPAA authorization. The permission to use PHI is done by having the subject sign a HIPAA authorization form. Use the UCF Health form for UCF Health medical records. UCF Health requires the HIPAA authorization to be a separate document. Other covered entities like health plans, healthcare providers, and healthcare clearinghouses may allow the HIPAA authorization to be embedded in the consent form. For medical records from other entities, you will need to work with that entity to either use their HIPAA authorization form or their HIPAA authorization language to embed in your consent form. Or you will need to develop a form that the entity will accept to allow you to get permission from their patients to access their PHI. In some cases, when obtaining a signature on a form is not possible, we can accept a permission letter from the privacy officer at that entity for you to access and use their PHI. Then UCF IRB can issue a waiver of HIPAA authorization. Other medical entities must either grant a waiver of authorization or give you permission to use their data. Remember, if you're recording identifiers, this cannot be reviewed as exempt review. The study must be submitted for expedited or full board review for UCF IRB to grant a waiver of HIPAA authorization. There is often confusion about what is protected health information and what identifiers fall under PHI. Any of these, names, geographic information smaller than a state, elements of a date smaller than a year like a birth date, any identifying communication numbers, record numbers or account numbers, any biometric identifiers and images, or other unique identifiers will be considered PHI if the data comes from medical records. Do a Google search for HIPAA identifiers to see the entire list. If you are requesting a HIPAA waiver for your study, HRP 441 is a checklist that covers the information you must provide to the IRB. The most frequently overlooked information is why you cannot conduct the research without the waiver. If you have direct access to participants, it's more likely that there is no reason that you cannot ask them for written permission to use their data. You also need to explain why your research requires that you have access to the PHI. Why is this protected health information needed in order for you to conduct the research? UCF IRB cannot grant a HIPAA waiver for PHI that is not coming from a UCF clinic unless you have permission to access the data. If you're collecting data from an outside clinic and need a HIPAA waiver of authorization, that clinic must either provide that waiver or issue you a document that gives you permission to access their records for research use. Here's a question. You are asking UCF students in an in-person research study to consent to letting you look at their medical records from UCF Health. What do you need? Your first choice, signed consent from the students to take part in the study. Second choice, UCF IRB to grant waiver of HIPAA authorization. Third choice, a permission letter from Orlando Health. Fourth choice, signed HIPAA authorization form along with the signed consent form. The correct answer is 4, a signed HIPAA authorization form along with the signed consent form. Signing a consent form to take part in the study is not enough to satisfy HIPAA requirements. UCF Health requires the HIPAA authorization form to be a separate form. UCF IRB is not likely to waive HIPAA authorization if you have direct contact with participants. If you are doing an in-person research study, there is not justification that allows the UCF IRB to waive the requirement for signed HIPAA authorization. If they are signing a consent, they can sign a HIPAA form too. A permission letter from Orlando Health does not apply for UCF Health medical records. Note that some entities, like sponsored studies, embed the HIPAA authorization within the consent form. As long as the records are not coming from UCF Health, we can accept that. UCF Health requires a standalone HIPAA form. That's the end of Module 5. In the next module, I will discuss preparing your IRB submission.